Hello, and welcome to another episode of Across the Spectrum. It's a Facebook event, and we are Autism Lifeline Links. Autism Lifeline Links is a collective impact project out of San Antonio, Texas, and we work to break down silos, increase communication, identify needs, and gaps and barriers in the system of care for people with autism and comorbid intellectual and developmental disabilities. So we have lots of amazing agencies. We have 14 agencies that are our electronic referral partners that work in a cloud-based platform to do referrals and create an electronic longitudinal record for social services. But then we have 4 community engagement work groups that really look at engaging other stakeholders who care about the autism and intellectual and developmental disability population to see how we can come together, increase communication, strengthen collaboratives, and impact things like public policy, or just raise awareness. And so one of our awareness raising activities are these Facebook events. And so we, every month, host one of these. And one of the things that came up very recently was about day habilitation programs. And so often there are these great day hab programs, there's tons of them across many communities, but trying to find the right fit for your young adult is really sometimes a bit of a challenge. And so finding something that sticks, we think of it just like Barbara had said a moment ago, that when you're looking to try to find out what college you want to go to, you do all sorts of searching and tours and doing those kinds of things. And it's no different when you're looking for a day hab program for your young adult, or if you are as a young adult looking for a place to be and go have that network. So I have with me today the lovely Barbara Goldman. She's with TEAMability, and she's the executive director over there. She was in the education system for a very long time before starting TEAMability, and is an amazing advocate for children and adults and families caring for a person with a intellectual or developmental disability, and especially with a focus at this time on the high acuity guys. And then we have the talented Jacob Ulczynski, and he is the senior director of the IDD services, or Intellectual Developmental Disability Services, at Alamo Area Council of Governments, which is our local intellectual and developmental disability authority here in San Antonio, Texas, in Bexar County. So this is Across the Spectrum, and we're just going to jump right in, and we want to start, I think, Jacob, can you tell us, in Texas, or at least in Texas, there's this thing, the Day Activity Health Services. It is DAHS, but everybody pronounces it as DOS. And so I always get confused. Right. Like when I hear DOS, I think DOSS or something like that, but it's DAHS. What is DAHS? Are they a governing body? Do they can you tell us a little bit about what they are and what their role is?
Sure. So Day Activity Health Services is a facility-based congregate setting for providing rehabilitative nursing and social services to persons with disabilities. And so I think it's important really to even take a step back from DOS and establish that really there are 3 different primary types of day programs that are available for individuals in this population group, our intellectual and developmental disability folks. So one is the Day Activity and Health Services. A second is called Day Habilitation. And then the third is called the Sheltered Workshop, or an enclave. Okay. And so they can all appear very similar on the surface. They're all tend to be congregate settings, facility-based work, or facility-based activities, I should say. But there's a really distinct difference. And so I'd like to take a second and talk about that difference. So a Day Activity Health Services program is focused on rehabilitative or restorative care. So you're working with the individual to take them from where they are and improve their level of functioning. And restorative care or rehabilitative care presumes that there was lost functioning over time due to some sort of disease process.
Oh.
Okay. And then a day habilitation program I should also mention that the day activity health services specifically excludes mental illness, substance abuse, or intellectual and developmental disabilities as the qualifying medical diagnosis.
So Jacob, can you give an example of who is a DOS provider then in our, not the people outside of San Antonio, but no, give me an example of who a DOS provider is.
So there are a number of DOS providers in the region. The Center for Healthcare Services has a DOS program.
Oh, okay.
There's, oh goodness, I'm blanking on their name, over in the middle of the west side, or northwest side. There's a number of them throughout town, but that focus is on restoring care and really on the nursing service. So it is a medical based program. Now that doesn't mean that a person with an intellectual or developmental disability is excluded, but that's not the medical criteria that is getting them eligible to enter that program. So there'd need to be some additional medical criteria that makes it the primary diagnosis that is making that person eligible for the DOS program.
Cool.
Okay.
Sorry. That's all right. DayHab. So what's DayHab?
Yeah. So
Dayhabilitation. We're all like DayHab for the world. So tell us what that is.
Absolutely. So dayhabilitation. If we take the second part of that title and look at habilitation. So we just talked about rehabilitation is there's a presumption of some sort of skill loss, and you're rebuilding that or restoring those skills. Habilitation is saying, okay, there wasn't skill loss, but because of the person's diagnosis or situation, that they're needing to develop skills that were never there to begin with. You develop or maintain those skills. So dayhabilitation is similar in appearance to DOS, and once again, it's this facility-based congregate setting, but you're working on building skills with the presumption that maybe a skill wasn't there to begin with.
Jacob,
that make sense?
No, it makes so much sense, and I know it's goofy, and I've been in this industry forever, but anybody that watches these knows every one of these, I'm like, oh my God, really? Thanks. Like, no,
That's right.
Yes.
I'm taking notes, Jacob.
I just saw Barbara scribbling, and I'm like, wait a minute, is Barbara scribbling this? Because you're one of the smartest ladies in town, and you've been around a while. And I'm like, wait a minute, we're learning something. So if we're learning something, I hope that parents are learning something. Okay, yes. So,
I hope so.
Excellent. So that's like a skill, like it's skills development. And so we're going to talk a little bit about when we get to Barbara. But yeah, okay. So then what's sheltered workshop then?
So yeah, DayHab is skills development, and in some ways, you can think of it almost as a continuation of the education system. Once somebody transitions out of school, if they're needing continued skill development, then dayhabilitation would be the opportune day program for that individual. And then sheltered workshops. Once again, it's generally facility-based, more of a congregate setting. But the focus there is to work on vocational skills and vocational training. So generally what this looks like in practice is it ends up being piecemeal work or assembly line type of work where individuals are working on developing those skills that they would use in a job place, a workplace in the community. Many sheltered workshops are what they call a Section 14C certified employers. So in the Fair Labor Code, or Fair Labor Standards, the federal government allows certain employers to become certified to provide a special minimum wage, or sometimes referred to as a sub-minimum wage. And so individuals that are working in sheltered workshops generally do receive pay for their work, but that pay is at this special minimum wage. So it's a rate that's below the standard minimum wage in the society. And that special minimum wage is allowed based on the identification that the worker's disability impairs their productivity.
And one of the things, and we won't necessarily get into it here, but is the is sometimes there can be some controversy around that rate, but there's a lot of nuances to it because the rate is also is designed that way so people with disabilities don't lose their SSI benefits or their Medicaid benefits. And so there's a lot of things. So we won't get into that here, but it is absolutely something that can be a point of contention when people talk about sheltered workshops. But what's really important to know is that it's about choice, right? And then all these are the kinds of choices that a young adult can make with their caregiver or with their guardian.
Absolutely. So you're right. There is some controversy around that special minimum wage, but I think the important part to note is that it's important to have a full spectrum of supportive services available to folks in the community, because individuals, especially our folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, no two of them are alike. Every single one is different. It comes to the table with different needs, different support needs, different skills that they've developed. And so it's important to look at what the individual or their legally authorized representative or guardian, what their goals are for that person over time in order to select the right day program that's going to work for them.
Okay, Jacob, that's so helpful. And guys, I just want to let you know, in the world, I'm gonna admit. So give me a second right here. We have somebody else joining us, and we're gonna give that a second. Hi, Mike. So Mike, this is Mike Pasquarella, and Mike is the dad of a young adult who is at the ARC of San Antonio. So Mike, we're already in taping mode. So we'll chime you in when we get to your section. We're going to let you talk a little bit about your program, how your kiddo and where they are at the ARC and why that's important to you. So I'll call your name when we're ready. How's that sound?
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike.
Sounds okay.
All right. So Miss Barbara, so we're gonna so when we look at these things, and Jacob, that was a great segue into talking about all the different kinds of programs, and you just said it beautifully. You really have to look at the individual. You have to look at what the individual's goals are, or what the goals are for that individual, for their family, or what they're trying to achieve. And so that's all very important. But one of the things that these programs, whether it is a DOS or Day Have or a sheltered workshop, that maybe isn't talked about as much, is that what it means to the individual for their socialization, for their soft skill building, other than like learning a skill or reinforcing a skill or relearning a skill, and we can put them in those three tranches as you just beautifully explained. But what else does it mean, Barbara, for somebody for a young adult to be able to attend a program, any one of these kinds of programs?
Well, I think when you think about the change that occurs when the school system is no longer there for the young person, parents are really used to the school really facilitating decisions, explaining programs, designing programs, individual programs. And when the future happens, that all becomes the responsibility of the parent. And so starting early and really understanding your child, no one understands the child as well as the parent, working initially with the school to think about what you would like to see the future hold, what's realistic and attainable. And then as you move toward making these decisions, thinking about the skills that the young adult already possesses. Do they need additional skills? What motivates them? What are their preferences? All of these things are really important to achieve happiness in a post-school setting, a setting that is totally different from the previous 12 to 16 years that a child has spent in school progressing through the programs. And so it's really key to think about the skills that need to be maintained and what will keep the young person's interest, what will spark them to want to go to that new network that we're creating of friends and meaningful activities. What's meaningful, and it was really interesting to learn about these 3 settings, Jacob, because knowing the difference between those settings helps in the decision-making process of what does my young adult need? You know, what are the goals, as you mentioned, Jacob, what are the goals for this person? That will, in addition to maintaining skills or developing new skills, provide an atmosphere of friendliness and communication and belonging.
And Barbara, I think that's so great because it's so true. Like, you may have somebody, again, it's just like there's some guys, neurotypicals, that go to college, there are some that go to tech, there are some that go to trade, you know. It's the same thing. Like, what is it if your young adult has really just does not want it? They don't want to work. They want to be in a more social environment, and maybe in time they'll want to go to a sheltered workshop, and maybe because they're making friends in day hab, and then their day hab friends are going to start going to sheltered workshop. Well, they want to go too, right? Like, so all of the things that really, in one of the things we always try to talk about in these in these across the spectrums is, guess what? Our guys on the spectrum and with IDD are no different than neurotypicals. They look a little different, things, the choices may be different, but what they desire as human beings and what their families desire for them is no different than what you want and envision for your neurotypical person or for yourself. And so always remembering that. So the choices may look different and where they go may look different, but at the end of the day, finding a valuable place for them to be, finding some place that's purposeful, and letting them feel like, helping them to feel like they're a part of something and they're important. That's the same as what we want for anybody else. Mm-hmm. So Michael, I'm gonna go to you now. And so can you tell us a little bit about who's your kiddo? And you're on mute, so you want to unmute. Thank you. Who's your kiddo? Who's your kid? What's their name? How old are they? What made you choose the ARC as your day hab program?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good, because sometimes when I do these Zooms, people can. I've got to apologize. I misfiled your email and I logged in, but I didn't have a password. So it took me 15 minutes to find the email.
Don't worry.
My daughter, Christina, has Down syndrome. And even though not officially diagnosed, what my wife and I agreed when my wife was alive was she also has some autistic tendencies, but her issue is mainly Down syndrome. The way I found the ARC, because by that time my wife had passed away, but the way I found the ARC is, initially, after Christina had aged out of Ronald Reagan High School, we decided that she needed, mainly for socialization. We were kind of satisfied at the time where she was developmentally, but she needed some activities, even though she's completely happy being here at home. We just thought it would be some great stimulus for her. Plus, it would give my wife the opportunity. I was still working full-time in the Army, not to have care or not to be caring for her, so she could do some stuff independent of Christina. Anyway, Alice passed away a year before I retired, and I stayed with the original organization that we found locally within a neighborhood. I won't name it, but it was very close to where I live here in San Antonio, so it was very convenient. As time went on, they had more and more clientele, and they moved their location a little further south from where I live here in Stone Oak, and that was still okay until they needed even more space and moved onto the south side, way south. So I started thinking about finding an alternative. Luckily, through a speech pathologist that's been working that was working with Christina at the time. She had another client or two within the ARC, and she said that she really thought the ARC's program was better than where I was, but that if I was interested in it, I'd probably have to find out if there was a waiting list. Luckily, and I think it's been about maybe 3.5 years that Christina's been with the ARC. Luckily, at the time that I approached the ARC, there was no waiting list. And I went through kind of the same visual and process and thought processes that my wife and I did when we found the first facility for her. But the most interesting thing was, and she recognized me before I recognized her, the person in charge of the ARC at that time was Jennifer Tarr. And she had been the transition person at Reagan, vocational transition person at Reagan for adults or children with disabilities at the time. So she recognized Christina before I recognized who Jennifer Tarr was. So right off the bat, I found it to be a very welcoming place. And over time, I found out that the people within the organization were much more organized than the facility that I left. And there seems to be a lot less personnel turnover than the facility that I left.
Well, thanks for that, Mike. I think that, you've just...
What I like about the ARC are how they, and I don't know what decision criteria they use, but they're trained. The classroom that Christina's in, or wasn't before all the COVID-19 restrictions came in, seemed perfectly suited for her. Christina doesn't have a lot of needs. She's a pretty quiet adult. She's 30 years old now. Go ahead.
Who, me, Mike?
Go ahead.
Oh, no.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Hello?
So, Mike, we can hear you.
I think he can't hear us.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, no, I heard silence. Sometimes my signal gets weak. I just wanted to make sure. Okay. No, okay. I can hear Cara. Okay, but anyway, I like the way the classroom she was placed in for her level of need. The activities are great. I like how, and I get to know when I was going in daily, I dropped off Christina myself, especially after I retired. I had the time. I would bring her in, personally walk her in, so I got to know the staff well. And I got to kind of see what the activities were over time. I liked the fact that they had the field trips to give her some variety in her day. And especially since one of the main physical activities for Christina was swimming, we taught her early on with her 3 other sisters how to swim. And we have a pool in our backyard, but she loved going to the Pam Stevens part of the ARC during the summer to do swimming on 1 day a week. So there were a lot of things going on that I liked. Plus, during the time she was there, I was able to switch over from the speech therapy that I had. It was more device assistance, which Christina and I weren't really good at using, to actual verbalization therapy. So I was able to link to somebody who came to visit her at least once a week or twice a week at the ARC. So it's a great base for her on a daily living. So it made me kind of sad, but I'm ultimately more concerned with her safety, that actually, I think it was the day before the ARC had to close because of the COVID-19 restrictions, I stopped down at the office and explained that I was kind of concerned that I'm going to start holding her back because this was around March the 15th or so. I think the 16th, the ARC had to close down, but we haven't been back then, even though I stay in communication and we do occasional not Zooms, but I think FaceTime sessions with, they are Zoom sessions with the personnel at the ARC.
Wow,
Thank
Mike
you.
has hit the nail on the head, hasn't he, Cara?
You're so funny. Thank you, Mike, for that. I'm so glad. I'm sorry that you had trouble getting in, but I'm so excited that you did, because you just did it all. We went in this perfect succession of building about what the programs are, to why they matter from Barbara, and like what it means in real time. And I even had in my notes, Mike, prior to you joining, was like, all right, what's a day in the life? And Mike just described it, right? And this is why knowing what the different options are is so really important. And then, Jacob, can you talk a little bit, like, how does somebody like start to assess? Like, where do you find the list? So we know that this should be happening in transition from high school, but it's never too early to start looking at these options, right? And so,
Correct.
where do you start to find this list? Can you call and just do a tour? And I know you don't speak for all of them, but yes, like you are
Sure.
kind of in that space. But before you do that, Jacob, this is just one of those points that we try really hard at Autism Lifeline Links to say in every one of these events is, if you have an individual in your life, or if you are an individual with an intellectual or developmental disability or autism, and you are not on the waiver and interest list, what are called the LTSS, long-term services and supports waivers, which can help can fund some of your day have slots or your assistive technology, or there's lots of things that they do. We want to encourage you to get on those lists. And if you are on those lists, make sure that when the LIDA calls you every 2 years, you're answering the phone and you're returning that call and updating your email, your contact, things like that. Because these long-term services and supports waivers, unfortunately, just in my time in Texas, which is 27 years, have gone from 7 years to 15 years of a wait time. So getting your individual with a disability on very early, like ECI age, is so important, so that by time they are a young adult or transitioning, that you are absolutely able to access those resources. And so for so many people, it doesn't really come up until puberty or transition age, which is 14, 15, and then you're on the list for 15 years. So then you're 30 years old before that can kick in. So we just want to, that's our little PSA that is constant in everything we do at Autism Lifeline Links and in all of our work groups, is focusing on those waivers and supports. So Jacob, how does somebody find out where are these lists, who's doing this, who's providing this service? Much to Mike's point, like, go check it out. You went to one, it was fine, but then you went to another, it's like, wow, this is awesome. So how do you do that? How do you start to access it, Jacob?
So thank you, Cara. You really just took the words right out of my mouth as far as throwing the shout out there for the waiver interest list and getting people signed up. So I so appreciate that Autism Lifeline Links is really pushing that message with families and with persons with intellectual or developmental disabilities or autism. So greatly appreciate that that push for the waiver interest list. To your question, how does somebody start to look into these different day programs? Where can you find that list? How do you locate it? So the short answer is, unfortunately, there isn't necessarily one comprehensive list, because these are different programs that developed over time in different service systems. There isn't necessarily a single list located anywhere. So the best places to reach out are to AACOG, with us as the local IDD authority, and completing an intake application and asking questions about services and programs so that we can start to provide the information through the IDD publicly funded service system. Other good places to reach out to are the ARC of San Antonio. ARC of San Antonio does a phenomenal job assisting families, doing public advocacy for additional services and supports. Places like TEAMability or Any Baby Can, all of those groups do fantastic work and are more than willing to begin to point families in the right direction and help provide resources and make them aware of what resources are available and where they can go to access those different resources.
Thanks, Jacob. And then in addition to that, like you can find the waiver and interest list information by calling AACOG as well, and or going to their website, and there's a waiver interest list tab that gets you to them, as well as the Department of Health and Human Services. So you would need to register in 2 different places to get on those lists. And it's not up yet, but we're modifying our page at Autism Lifeline Links, our public policy page, so that there are links to all those places. That should be up by the 15th of August, so that there will be a link to how to get on those lists. So Barbara, as somebody who works with some of the most vulnerable people in our community, why is this something that is important as much for the person or the individual as it is for the caregiver to have someplace where where their loved one belongs, right?
Well, I'll go back again to the way it is before a young adult is transitioning, when we are assured that we have a school program that is keeping the child safe and providing some meaningful activities. But when we look ahead to the future, and that is our responsibility as parents, we really have to understand that we can't assume all of the duties and responsibilities that someone else has been providing throughout the day for our young person. That as they are getting older, so are we, and that we all need to take care of our own vital needs and be able to preserve our health and welfare for the benefit of our child. And so getting some respite and having time, as Mike said, one of his goals was to ensure that his wife had some time for herself and for her activities. And that's really critical. I think the parents of a child with special needs often think, no one can do this but me. No one does this as well as I do. I don't need any help. But we all need help, and we all need time to address our own vital needs, our relaxation, our relationships, our spiritual self. And so I think it's really critical to find, with good planning, the right setting for your young adult, so that you are assured that they are not participating in babysitting, that they have meaningful activities, that you do what Mike did, which is take the time to get to know the facility so that you feel comfortable with turning over some of your responsibilities to someone else that you trust, that you know is providing the level of support and understanding that your young adult needs, that has the variety of activities to meet their goals and interests, that is safe and accessible, which was a key point for Mike. And then as a parent, you feel more comfortable with the idea of sharing that responsibility. If you do your homework, then you can make that transition to letting go and having some time for yourself.
Barbara, so many reasons I love you all these years, but that's perfect, right? And so as these guys know, maybe Mike doesn't, but I worked for almost 24 years at Respite Care San Antonio. And so that message being so clear and trying to help parents understand that from a very young age. Barbara and I are from the same playbook all these years, like, you're right, maybe somebody can't do it as well as you. And you're right, you do know your dude best, right? But over time, you may not be able to meet all those needs. So getting yourself to be able to learn to trust somebody else to help and care for and learn and know your individual and your loved one or your child is so important, because we're not all going to be here forever, right? And it's as much about that young person learning that they can trust somebody else, right? And they can have something outside of the home that is for them as well. I'm going to circle back to Mike. Mike, when you said that Christina would like, sure, she's fine, she's kind of easy breezy, but she'd rather stay at home and hang on the couch. I'm like, so wouldn't I, Mike? But you know, the fact of the matter is that it's as much important for your wife, you, and for Christina to get out and go and do. I think, were you going to say something about waivers, Michael?
Not well, waivers. The way Alice found out, my wife, when Christina was still in high school, about applying, or the program itself, was by word of mouth from another parent. When she had also found out about camp.
Yep.
And if it wasn't for that week that we had Christina at camp and Alice's interaction with another parent, she would have never known. And that started the process to get to it took us 9 years to come off of the list, and then another 2 years for the full HCS, or whatever the initials are now, for those benefits. Prior to that, and this was prior to coming to the ARC, when we were with actually 2 different day-hab programs, we paid out of pocket. It wasn't that expensive, and we didn't send Christina 5 days a week. We maybe every other day, 3 days a week, so we could afford it that way. But the patience part, as long as Christina was in high school, after high school, there was a couple-year period where we had to, like I said, it had to come out of our pocket, but we had kind of adjusted the number of days that she could participate based on the expense.
So Mike, I want to thank you for that. And you know, it's so, I'm glad you got connected, but it's also something, I saw Jacob smirk, it's also disheartening, right? That it wasn't until high school and that you didn't find out about it but word of mouth.
Yes.
And so those are things that are the reality of it, but know that to the world listening, as well as everybody, that's stuff that we work really hard on in all of our work groups. Autism Lifeline Links, we're just the convener of the passionate people that you see on the screen here and the hundreds of others that participate in these work groups to try to improve that systemic care. And you should know that we're working on a public policy agenda right now to have that information about waivers operationalized at ECI discharge, right? And so like that is huge. It's something that came out of our work groups. It's like, why don't we? Like, so Pam Stevens from the ARC, you mentioned, you know, her earlier, like that's something that people like Barbara and Pam and I have been talking about for 25 years. It's like, we got to get them on earlier. And so often parents aren't ready to reconcile a diagnosis at 2, 3, 4, 5. And they think they'll always care for their young person. So like what Mike said, what Barbara said, but the fact of the matter is that we need to get kids on earlier. So I want to thank all of you so very much. This was, I always love them. I'm like, oh man, we got nothing to play. They're always great, and to have everybody be a part of it. One of the things, I just think it's funny just to remind everybody that Autism Lifeline Links, we have 14 electronic referral partners, and AACOG, Any Baby Can, ARC, Camp, Brighton, Respite Care San Antonio, and we're all mentioned today just in what we do. And so know that they're communicating electronically, but then outside of that, we have the stakeholders like TEAMability and SAISD and Edgewood and East Central and Northside and Alma Heights ISD and Nellie Reddick Center. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on about the people that come together every month to try to bring this kind of content to you and think about what do we want to raise the awareness about. And so I hope we did a good job helping the community, whether you have a person in your life with a disability that you need to make these decisions for, or just helping raise awareness about what day programs are out there and what each of their respective objectives are, right? And then how do you find one? How do you connect with them? And ultimately, how do you get that funded? And so in all of this, knowing so importantly that a parent or a caregiver and people who love a person with a disability, that there are other people out there who will do a swell job. Just start to look. Just start to look, ask the questions, trust your gut, but know that the broader you open your circle of care and trust, the more your individual will care and trust those people. And so we want to thank Barbara from TEAMability and Jacob from AACOG and Mike, dad advocate and participant in the ARC program, for being with us today. And I hope everybody stays safe in COVID and continues to walk through this earth passionately and purposefully. Thank you all very much. If you'll just give me, we'll sign off and say until next month with our next Across the Spectrum.
And Cara, real quick, if I can add one last thing before we do the final sign off. I just did want to build off of the points that all of y'all made previously about the importance for mom, dad, primary caregiver to be able to engage in self-care by including other groups in their loved one's care. I can't tell you how frequently we see families come in crisis because they were trying to do the care 100% by themselves for years and years and years. And now the caregiver just has nothing left to give because they weren't able to reinvest in their own self-care over time. And so one of the things that we frequently hear from families is that they don't know how to start. They don't know how to start to engage those different agencies, even if they know where the agencies are and who they are. They don't know how to start even asking the questions to get to better understand the agencies. So I want to make a recommendation that families look at a document called the Explanation of Services and Supports. It's a document that's put out by Health and Human Services Commission, and I can send that to you, Cara, and maybe you can post it when this video gets posted.
That's perfect, Jacob. Do that,
Because in that document, HHSC, Health and Human Services Commission, has put together a list of like prompt questions that parents can use when they're initially reaching out and starting to interview these different day programs to determine which one is right for them and which one's the best fit. And so they don't have to come up with a list of questions all on their own. They can use the questions as kind of a starting point and a leap-off points to begin those interviews and begin to get to know these different provider agencies in the community.
Jacob, again, another reason I love Jacob Ulczynski as well. So perfect. Thank you for that wrap. And it's so important, and thank you for the reminder. We'll put that up, as well as we have a great waiver that was great form. It's called 5 Things to Know. It's a super keep it simple about the 5 things to know about the waivers and how you access them. That was created by Brooke Kearney when she was at the ARC, who then went to Down syndrome, was now at Morgan's Wonderland. So again, all of the connections and how we all keep together, as well as we'll post the grid of the phone numbers to call to get on the different waiver programs. So we'll make sure that we link those as well. And again, Jacob, my old job running emergency shelter for kids with special needs, you're exactly right. We have to self-preserve before that crisis point happens. So thank you for helping figure out how to get on the path, and Mike for affirming that as a dad, and Barbara as an advocate. Well, everybody, thank you, and happy almost weekend.
Thank you, Cara.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.